let me give everybody who's listening some advice. Never board a circus train because apparently they are the most dangerous transportation ever devised by man because they all derail, they all crash, and everything gets away. And now you've got everything breathing out in the woods all over the place.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour and monster hunting survivor's guide. I am your host, William R. Hincy, and joining me today, I'm really honored and thrilled to have author Michael Mays. Michael, welcome to the bar.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you asking me.
Yeah, I'm really stoked about this. As anyone watches the show knows, whenever I get to talk about like Sasquatches and things, I geek out with it. So I'm pretty excited here. But let me give you the kind of 10-cent introduction. Although I don't know, does that term even apply? I feel like it's like dollar stores don't even apply anymore. They're like the $15 introduction here.
That's right.
So you've written several books here, including Valley of the Apes, The Search for Sasquatch in Area X, Shadow Cats, The Black Panthers of North America. The children's book, Patty, A Sasquatch Story. And then you also have the book, Life in the Middle. And I think that one, I forgot to write it here. That's like a survivor's guide for like middle school, or is that just Life in the Middle?
Well, I don't know so much a survivor's guide. I've managed to survive, but so there may be some wisdom in there somewhere. But it's mainly it's a lot of anecdotes from I've been doing this over I think 23, 24 years now. So as I went through all those years, from time to time something humorous or poignant or something would happen, and I made a point rather to note it and jot some details down. And one day I decided, I really should do something with that. And really it's kind of a vanity project in a way, much more so than the other books. And there was another motive. I had never completely self-published through Kindle Direct myself. So I thought I had this material. This would be the perfect vehicle to try it out with,
Sure.
And, but it's just funny and interesting things, at least to me, that have happened to me over the many years that I've been teaching middle school. They've all been middle school. I've coached higher levels, but I've always taught middle school. So
right. Well, I always like to say to people that have been in the service or been in the school system, thank you for your service.
Well, you're welcome.
Going into a war zone one way or the other, So.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure I'd go quite well. There are days it's been that way. So yeah. So you're welcome. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
All right, very good. Awesome. So I love to start the show with getting a sense for where you are in the world. So could you maybe just tell us where you are and where's the best place to get a drink there?
Oh boy. I'm in Temple, Texas, which most people outside of Texas for sure won't know where it is. If you look at a map and you see where Dallas-Fort Worth is on the map, and then you find San Antonio, we would be almost directly in the middle between those two. If you know Texas a little bit, it would be halfway between Austin and Waco. So we're right on the Interstate 35 corridor. Best place to get a drink in Temple, Texas. It might be my house.
I believe it.
I've gotten older. Going out to have a drink has gotten crazy expensive. So we just, we stay in a lot and do our own thing. But I couldn't tell you. I've been married 32 years. Haven't done much of the bar scene in quite a while.
For a while, yeah. Yeah, no, I understand completely. It's funny, when we remodeled, we put this bar in behind me. And I never thought my wife was going to go for it. I just kind of threw it out as something I would like, but didn't think I thought it was going to be squashed for certain. I think, well, we put a bar there. And she's like, sounds like a nice idea. We like to entertain and stuff. Yeah, we'll put a bar in. And it's worked out, especially like you said, as the prices have gone up. It's crazy to go out and drink. And then you have the driving, if you need to Uber, all of that. It's a pretty
crazy. It's crazy. It's like everything else. It's just gone through the roof. So we just stay at home and practice a little mixology ourselves.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very good. Very good. That's the best way to do it. Awesome. So then I thought a fun place to start the show here in earnest would be in the middle, a la middle school. Or maybe start with Life in the Middle. Could you maybe tell us? I know you told me a little before kind of the recording officially started here. Maybe you could tell us what where you got the idea for the book, kind of what it's about.
Sure. Well, I've been teaching, I think the number is 23 years. It might be 24. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but 23. And I've always taught the middle school level, mainly seventh grade, but I've taught all three, sixth, seventh, and eighth grades. I've coached most of that time. Only the last 5 years have I been out of the coaching and just in the classroom straight. And through those many years, from time to time, they're funny little creatures, and from time to time, something unusually humorous would happen. At least I thought it was unusually humorous, and also from time to time, something kind of poignant that kind of pulls at the heartstrings a little bit happens. And if I've got any sense at all, it was simply realizing when those things happen that, hey, that's a little unusual. I should jot down the details of this and maybe revisit this later. I really didn't have any aspirations to write a book or anything about it. But as I collected them, I said, well, originally I was going to maybe do a blog of some kind and do blog posts. And I just thought, we'll just put these together, a little collection. And that's how the book came about. It only took 23 years to come up with what I thought was suitable material.
Right. So I think your website said you coached, it was football and basketball, right?
Mainly football and basketball. I did that every year. Coached some track, some golf. I basically, if they played in middle school, I coached it at one time or another, with the exception of swimming and soccer. Don't know anything about soccer. It wasn't around when I was growing up. Like you, I was a kid of the 80s. And so we went from football season in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the summer, had a short hiatus, and started all over again in the fall. And we did have track that kind of coincided with baseball a little bit. But so yeah, soccer, there were no youth leagues. It wasn't on TV. So I just grew up not being familiar with it.
Right. It was like the rest of the world knew about it. And it was like, I forget when we started talking, and America started talking about it and taking it more seriously.
I remember the first time the powers that be kind of tried to make it popular in America was when, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, so I hope the soccer folks out there don't just kill me. Pelé. He was kind of on the, he's thought to be by many maybe the greatest soccer player that's ever lived. I mean, he's kind of one of those figures that could be the Babe Ruth of soccer. And I think, if I recall, I was just a kid, but he was on the kind of the backside of his career. And he signed with a fledgling league in the United States. And the team he signed with was called the New York Cosmos. I remember that.
Oh,
and so briefly, it kind of flared up a little bit there. And I think Wide World of Sports or something like that might have aired a game or two. But it just didn't really take at that time. And maybe it's because he was kind of past his prime. I don't know. But no other international stars seemed to follow him over at that time. So it just never really caught on. But I do remember as a kid when he came over, and first time I heard
remember that name too. I remember hearing it, but
just don't remember much else about it other than that. But that would have been maybe the late 70s, but early 80s, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. So, but that's why I don't know anything about it. But everything else I've had my hand in at one time or another, whether I knew anything about it or not. Sometimes they just need sometimes they need more of a sponsor than they do a true coach. So the best gig was coaching golf, because those kids, they were the kids of the dads who took them golfing every weekend. They'd been golfing since they were knee high. And all I did was follow them in the golf cart and make sure they behaved. And I played behind them. It was free golf for me every day.
Right.
And take them to some tournaments here and there. So that was the best gig. But yeah, a little bit of everything.
Right, sure. That's hilarious. I mentioned to you when we were first chatting before the show was that my brother also was my brother and my sister-in-law are teachers, but my brother specifically, who's also named Michael, my older brother Mike, he at the end, I think actually he might still be doing golf. I think golf was the one he kicked with. He stayed with.
Well, if I was going to keep one, that would have been the one I'd kept too if I had the choice.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's really funny. Also, I wonder what what the process of coaching. What did it teach you about yourself, like specifically, like over the years?
Well, I was a basketball player. Now I played everything as a young man. I stopped playing football after my sophomore year in high school. I was at a 5A high school, big high school, and I was tall and lean and lanky. I just didn't have the build to play 5A football. If we had been at a small school somewhere, I probably could have done it. But I was much more of a basketball-looking guy. And so I went straight basketball. I was also better at basketball than I was football. And so ended up managed to play a little at a small college, here in Texas. And as I got into coaching afterwards, I kind of assumed that would be the route I went. And turns out coaching basketball is excruciating. It's the worst. It's just terrible. When you coach football, and I love football. I just, like I said, I didn't really have the build for it. I've always followed it, played it, and coached it all those years. Coaching football is much more fun. You have much more control of the game. You control the pace. How quickly do you get a play into the huddle? What play do you call? You run this play to set up that play. It's kind of this chess match kind of thing going on. And it's much more, like I said, you just have much more control of it. I found it much more engaging. Basketball, you spend all week, you practice your sets and you practice this offense against man defense, this one against a 2-3 zone, this one against a 1-3-1 trap. This is our press breaker. This is our half court press. This is our full court press. These are our sideline plays. These are our inbound plays from underneath our own basket. And you just kill yourself with all these things. And then you get up there and you just watch these guys just running like a rugby scrum up and down and you have absolutely no control. I mean, you're shouting instructions as best you can, but it just turns into this kind of hully-gully mess. And you find out that 95% of what you work on, you never really get to use in game situations because it's just up, down, up, down, up, down. And there's just very little control. It's much more of a player-dominated game, whereas football's obviously the player's the ones on the field executing, but the coach is much more engaged and controls a coach-dominated kind of situation. So that was more engaging to me than basketball. It was just, like I said, it was just so painful. It was just excruciating. You'd call a timeout, you'd get them over there and you said, no, we're going to do this and this and this. And then, one kid runs the wrong way or something. And there's just, all of a sudden it's just chaos out there. And it's just, so football I enjoyed more, was better. The other thing is, as a former basketball player who was pretty good, I wasn't great or anything, but I was good enough, like I said, to go play a little small college ball. I could never understand why they couldn't see what I saw. That they didn't. And since I didn't go that far in football, I think I was a little more patient coaching football than I was with basketball. So, I don't know if
you see
really
that in basketball all the time. You see like the great players, like Michael Jordan, trying to like do everything and he's the greatest player ever. But then
yeah, they rarely work out as coaches. Magic Johnson was a terrible coach. There have been some exceptions. Larry Bird was a pretty good coach.
That's true. Yeah, Larry Bird's one of the exceptions.
Bill Russell, you want to go real old school, he won a championship as a player coach. The Celtics years ago, but most of the time the star players, you're right, because I think they just don't have the patience. They don't understand. Why can't you just do this? And the answer is because I'm not you. I'm not Michael Jordan. You
just shimmy your shoulder and do it fadeaway over that guy that's 6 inches taller than you. What's wrong with you?
I think there's something to that. I do.
Right. Oh, very good. And then last question about middle school. So about kind of coaching here in general. So what's always interested me with coaching, specifically, maybe because I grew up here, mostly like Los Angeles area. I was born in West Virginia, but I grew up kind of in the shadow of Los Angeles here for most of my life. So I grew up with Magic. I remember Magic's coaching stint because it started very promising, and I'm like,
it lasted about it lasted about as long as his talk show did. I remember that. So that didn't last long. So, but yeah, you're right. You're in the wheelhouse. So you came from Jerry West territory in West Virginia and went to Lakerland. So you're
right, absolutely
right there with them.
Right. And so I had the Phil Jackson years, and one of his big things was the like getting everyone to kind of sacrifice for the team, right? And that's a lot harder when you start getting these guys that are mega rich and things. But I think I don't even know if it might be just as hard, I would guess, with like, teenagers and, I guess preteens and teenagers.
It can be, and it's harder with basketball. AAU, travel squad, select teams. I'll be honest with you, I don't care for them. And I think the idea behind them originally was good, but like a lot of things, they kind of get corrupted. And now they're just going cherry picking the best players, and it costs these families a lot of money. And so it's like anything else. If you invest your money in it, you want to see your kid play, you want to see your kid do well. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids and their parents, they think their kid's going to the NBA. And so therefore he should be catered to, and he should be fed the basketball all the time. And I have fought against some entitlement. Well, I played select ball, and so I should get to do what I want. You get some of these kids, you call timeout, like I said, we're going to run this. And they get out there and as soon as they touch the ball, they take a shot, And you've got their AAU coaches shouting at them instructions from the stands. You've got parents. I've had kids who said, if I don't score X number of points, I get grounded. As a coach, what do you do with that? Because their future, they think, is riding on this. And you try to gently tell them, and this is true, I coached kids. I played against kids. I played against people who played in the NBA or played professional basketball. I've got this great picture of me standing next to Tito Horford on the court. Tito Horford is the father of Al Horford, who plays for the Celtics right now.
Okay, yeah.
And Tito was 7'1", and I was 6'3", and I'm standing there looking up at him. I mean, I said, guys, when you see an NBA level talent, there's no doubt. If you have to ask, I wonder if that's good enough. I wonder if I'm good enough if you have to ask, the answer is no. And I coached guys who went on and played, lots of scholarship guys, a couple who went and played overseas, but I never had an NBA player. Played against a couple in college and in high school, and even they basically got a cup of coffee and played mostly overseas. And now they're playing professional ball, but I try to tell these boys, I said, go for it, man. I hope you make it, but you better get your degree because it's awful tough out there. And I'm sorry if you're 5'3", 190 in 8th grade, you're probably not going to make the NBA. So it's
well, the NBA is so hard too because you might be 6'6" in the 8th grade, and it's still probably not going to make it because it's so it's so hard to get in.
And just in my little rinky-dink career, I went from I was 6'3" and 1/4. I used to be 6.5 before my hair betrayed me. So I was a little over 6'3", and I went from being one of the taller guys on the court in high school to being usually the smallest guy on the court in college. And that was small college. It was, at that time, it was NAIA ball. It wasn't, and so the problem I had is my skill set was that of like a power forward.
Sure.
But the power forwards are 6'8", 6'9", and
Mm-hmm.
the fact of the matter is your skill level can be the same, but a good big man beats a good little man every time, and that's what you run up against. You're just overmatched physically, and
Right.
so that's how I got into the coaching part, because the playing part wasn't going to go much farther. So, so that's how they go. So you try to get that across to them, and you don't want to crush dreams, but at the same time, okay, guys, you're only 5 years from getting out of high school, so a little reality needs to seep in here too, and so it's a fine line you walk sometimes.
Right. Well, it's like I tell people when we talk writing and things, right? Because it's like basketball, it's easier to see because there's height,
Oh yeah.
there's athleticism and things. But there's also just talent. There's other things that's not as like it's not as glamorous to talk about and may make us uncomfortable, but it's like some people are more talented at certain things.
Well, sure.
Some people work harder, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't mean you can't do those things, but you gotta like have some realism to what you're.
This is the other part that was frustrating about basketball coaching was it's very dominant, talent dominated. Now, a good coach can take some mediocre players and make them better. And well, I'll give you an example. My favorite team I ever coached, we played this other team from across town, and they had like 15 cloned gazelles. They were just all huge, could jump out of the gym, and they were all exactly the same. And the first time we played them, they beat us by 40, which is that's ugly, because middle school quarters are not as long as,
Right.
So it was bad. But, we coached them up and we played them a second time, and they only beat us by 20 the second time. And then we played them one more time in the district tournament, and they beat us by 12. So we got better and we got better. But to be frank, we still got our ass kicked 3 times because they were more talented. It just, there's at some point, you just can't overcome that. And track and basketball, you got the hosses or you don't. That was another thing about football that made it fun, is you could hide a weaker player. If you had a small defensive tackle, you put your best linebacker right behind him, or vice versa. If you've got a kid who he's smart, he wants to play, wants to be part of the team, but he can't really do much, well, you rotate him, and he's one you send the play in with him, and he calls play in the huddle, and he lines up, and we're never going to throw him the ball because he can't catch it, but and to be honest, he doesn't want us to throw the ball to him. He knows he can't catch it. And but you can move some pieces around in football. You can flip your lines, have a strong side, and we don't use the word weak. We don't say weak sideline. We say quick. We've got a strong side and a quick side, right? And but you flip them, and that way you have your best players where you want them all the time. But you can do a little of that in basketball. You might as well be naked out there, because you can look on this end of the floor and then look down at your end of the floor, and you know what's about to happen. When you have if you've got a chance or not, and sometimes you just you don't, and that's not much fun to sit there and take that beating.
Right. Well, and you have to play both sides too, right? Like football, if you have a guy that's a good receiver but can't tackle anyone for the life of them, you can just play receiver. Basketball, you have a guy that's a good shooter, but he can't defend anyone. Well, now you have a huge hole, out, and you only get 5 guys, so it's a lot harder to try to cover that. So, very true. Awesome. So let's move on to some talk about the Black Panther. So, I mentioned, and I think the book was the Black Panthers of North America.
Shadowcats. Yeah, Shadowcats, the Black Panthers of North America. Correct.
Okay, thank you. And so I was really intrigued actually when I saw that, because then when and I like to do full disclosure on the show, and I'll link him up here. So Matt Pruitt put us in contact, and I told you before, I think we spent like 3 hours talking Sasquatch, because I had so many questions, and I have Bigfoot researcher just to throw everything at it. And he was so gracious, and we just chatted away.
Matt's the best. He really is.
Yeah, he was really awesome. So I've heard of like the Beast of Exmoor, I think is the name that they give them in the UK. But I hadn't really heard about the phenomenon in the States. So I wonder if you could give us kind of the broad overview of it, and maybe, wherever you want to take it, broad overview to kind of get us started here.
Sure. Well, I got into the whole Bigfoot thing as a young man. I could give you the whole rundown. Maybe I will later when we get to that, but
Sure.
never really grew out of it, I guess. But I was also interested in some other things, and because of that, I decided to start this blog called the Texas Cryptid Hunter, and blog. It's on Blogspot. It's the Texas Cryptid Hunter is the name of the blog, and it was on that blog I could explore some other topics. And growing up in Texas, let me give people a little rundown on Texas. A lot of people think it's the dry, dusty Western town desert that they see in every John Wayne movie, where he rides by the same rock 12 times in the big chase scene. And there are certainly parts of Texas that are like that. But I grew up in East Texas, and East Texas is much more like the traditional South. It's heavily forested, lots of rivers, creeks, streams, gets a lot of rainfall. And it's still a lot of undeveloped. Now it's getting less and less all the time, but areas, swamps, river bottoms, piney woods, deciduous forests, just the whole bit. And where I grew up, black panthers were just something you heard about. If you were sitting on the porch one night and out in the woods, you heard something screaming. Well, what is that? Well, that's that old panther out there, right? And probably should get into the semantics of the deal a little bit too. Panther is one of the words that's used across the country to describe a cougar, a puma, mountain lion, panther. They're all the same thing. Now in the South, nothing's 100%, but in the South, usually when someone mentions a panther, they're talking about a black animal, a long-tailed black cat, mountain lion size. They'll say cougar when they say it's, or a mountain lion when they see one, but they'll say panther when they are talking about a black animal. And it's just something that's kind of in the culture down here. And as I grew up, I knew they weren't common, but they weren't that unusual either. It was just another animal that lived out in the woods or the bottoms, and people saw them from time to time. And what's funny is I was, oh gosh, maybe in my 30s before I realized there's not supposed to be any such animal. And people say, well, of course there is. I've seen them on TV, of course there is. Well, what those cats are, those are black leopards or jaguars. They have a genetic trait that they carry from melanism, which is melanin, of course, is the genetic component that makes skin and or hair darker, right? And they have a mutation where it just kind of goes crazy, and they're black. It's a recessive trait in leopards. It's a dominant trait in jaguars. And of course, we're not supposed to have either one of those cats anymore in the U.S. Jaguars were once native, and they're kind of making a mini comeback out west, Arizona and Nevada. But we're not supposed to have any more in Texas or anywhere else in the South. So what are they? And people say, well, it's a black mountain lion. Well, they supposedly don't carry the genetics to do that. If you think about the cats that can be black, they all have spots or stripes. So that they already kind of have this genetic thing going where part of their coat is black. Mountain lions are kind of this weird in between, because the cubs, the little ones, are spotted. They look almost like a coat of a bobcat or a snow leopard when they're little bitty, but they lose those spots as they get older and turn into the tawny kind of honey-colored cat that we're familiar with. And in all the years we've studied mountain lions, had them in captivity, zoos, circuses, whatever, various menageries, never has a black one popped up, ever. And never has a black specimen been absolutely confirmed, by science. There are some intriguing photographs and things like that, but that doesn't serve as proof. And so if they're not mountain lions and we don't have leopards and jaguars here, what are they? And so people that will laugh in your face, if you said you saw a Sasquatch, they would laugh in your face, will fight you if you tell them, well, black panthers aren't real either. They'll fight. I know what I saw, and of course that sounds a lot like Bigfoot witnesses do too, and but I said, as far as science is concerned, they're lumped into the same category as Bigfoot, Yetis, Loch Ness monsters, and unicorns. There's no such thing. But the phenomenon is deeply ingrained, especially in the South. It's not relegated to only the South, but it's really a cultural thing down here. And you look at high school mascots or college mascots for that matter. If Panthers is the mascot, it's almost always a black cat. The Carolina Panthers, the NFL, it's a big black growling cat, right? The exception is the Florida Panthers, the hockey team. But in Florida, they have kind of a unique situation. They've got this subspecies of puma called the Florida panther, and it's endangered. And the efforts to save it, restore it, have been big news there. So a lot of people are a lot more familiar with it. So that one little area of Florida is kind of the exception. Everywhere else you go, you hear panther. It's a black cat, and so. What are people seeing? And so one day for the blog, I came across a newspaper article and I just kind of summarized it and threw it out there. It had been a Black Panther sighting not too far outside of Dallas, Plano area. Wasn't quite as grown up as developed then as it is now. And my inbox just exploded, and everybody's sending me their stories. And I kept them. I corresponded with the ones that I felt were the most compelling. And when somebody would send me one that I felt very well might be genuine, I would write it up on the blog, and it would just generate more and more posts. So as my files on this grew, I thought, I should do something with this. This is clearly something that many more people are seeing this than are seeing a Sasquatch, right? You get in a room with 20 people in the South, you can't throw a rock and not hit somebody who's seen one or know someone who's seen one of these cats, right? And so that was the genesis behind the book. I thought, I got all these people writing in, and some of them were years and years ago, but they didn't have anybody to talk to about it. They never knew who to report it to. And so that was the idea. That's what kind of the seed of the idea that became the book. That's how it started, was through the blog.
Well, that's so interesting. I never, I guess probably because of, like you're talking about, that we see Black Panthers all the time, right? I mean, there's the Black Panther movie, everything.
Right. People don't know there's not supposed to be any such thing.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I knew there wasn't supposed to, because we're actually, where I'm at is if you've seen Pasadena with the Rose Parade and everything, right? They like to show the San Gabriel Mountains, especially if they have like a light. It's going to be a light coat because it's pretty low by Pasadena, but a light coat of snow there. So when I ride my bike up, the neighborhoods, you get about a mile up the mountain from me here in the foothills, you start seeing little signs for beware of mountain lions and things, because they'll come down into the neighborhood sometimes at night. I in fact, actually, one day I was riding my bike. It was kind of funny, is I usually just ride and I let my mind wander. I do a lot of my writing when I'm writing, like paradoxically, like a lot of my ideas kind of come and I just let my mind wander and go ride. But one day I kept thinking I was being watched, and I'm not anxious. So it was really weird. I was like, okay, I was like, whatever. And so I just rode and kind of came back, and a mountain lion was spotted exactly in that neighborhood. They treated it and kind of had taken it. So I don't know if it didn't do anything to anyone. I don't know if it was actually watching me. It might have been coincidence, but it was that exact same day. My wife sent it to me. She knows I like stuff like that. So I've seen mountain lions. I've never seen one in person. I've seen one in person, but I've never seen one kind of out roaming in the wild. But I just figured, okay, well, yeah, maybe sometimes they're black, but I had no idea that, they can.
Yeah, and no doubt there are cases of mistaken identity, and the coat of a mountain lion can vary in tone.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, winter months they thicken up and they take on a little bit of a darker hue. Some of them can be this deep chestnut color, almost a reddish tint. Some of them are kind of an ash gray. Down here, I know of a researcher who believes that it might have something to do with they bed down in the woods with all the tannins in the soil, that might somehow affect the coloration. And the fact of the matter is, who knows?
Right.
Who knows? But I tend to believe that it's probably not a pure blood mountain lion. The idea of some sort of hybrid cat has kind of taken hold, and I think it's possible. We've got a little wildcat here in Texas called a jaguarundi. Most people don't even know it exists, and it's this odd, long-bodied, almost looks like an otter more than a cat, but it's got this tail that's as long as its whole body, and they can be black. And I think when people see those, they know it's not a regular cat,
Right.
but they know it's a cat, but that's not grandma's tabby, right? That's something else. And so they jump to the Black Panther diagnosis, so to speak. And I think too, cats, if the physical coupling can take place, cats can mate. So a bobcat can mate with a domestic cat. And there are some pretty large breeds of domestic cat. And so if that happens, bobcats, by the way, can be melanistic. It's pretty rare, but it does happen. But if they breed with a domestic, they now have the genetic, this witch's brood that's in the offspring is you've got you've got the genetics for a long tail as well as a bobtail. And sometimes the long tail is what presents itself. And you also have the genetics to possibly be melanistic or to be black. So I think a friend of mine named Chester Moore, who's a great outdoors writer, man, that's another guy you should talk to sometime. He just has coined the term black longtails. He just calls them black longtails because he believes more than likely the truth of the matter is it's a hybridization of some kind that's taken place, and now their offspring, they continue to perpetuate. And so the truth of the matter, jaguars are making a comeback. If they can cross the border into Arizona or New Mexico, I said Nevada, I think earlier, I meant New Mexico. Why couldn't they cross the border into Texas?
Sure.
As you've seen in the news, our border is not exactly ironclad, right? So
I think the cats get sneaked through.
So I think the cats can get through. So if they're coming through in Arizona and New Mexico, there's no reason to think they couldn't come through here. The question then becomes, well, how come no one's seeing the spotted cats? Right? Because the black are supposed to be the exception to the rule.
Right.
And since my answer to that is since the black trait in jaguars is dominant, if a few of these jags got across and then were somehow cut off, they couldn't retreat back. So you had a small breeding population in the Texas, the South, and there was a black one in the mix. If that's the genetic pool, eventually they'll all be black because that's a dominant trait. And so maybe that's why you don't see the common coats with the rosettes, the spots on them, like you would expect to if they were just coming across the border. So that's a possibility. The jaguarundi, the hybridization. The only one that's laughable to me is the escaped exotic. Certainly an isolated incident here or there, sure. But this idea, you hear all these stories about, the circus train crashed here years ago, it derailed. And I'll tell you what,
that Netflix show, Joe the Tiger
Oh
King
yeah, the
or
Tiger
something,
King.
like
Yeah,
his tigers got out.
let me give everybody who's listening some advice. Never board a circus train, because apparently they are the most dangerous transportation ever devised by man, because they all derail, they all crash, and everything gets away. And now you've got everything breeding out in the woods all over the place. And so, the idea that an escaped exotic, okay, how are they going to find each other and then breed, and then there's no population there, and there's one example of the book that I used. It was actually a tiger. A guy had kept tigers, and he was somewhere in Arkansas. I forget exactly where he was off the top of my head, but as some of these exotic cat owners find out, a tiger's a handful when they get big, and it was too much for him. And instead of going to a zoo or a big cat rescue or somewhere like that, he decided, this is some brilliant higher level thinking here. He drove it. I don't know. I think it was 50, 60 miles from his house, and let it loose in the woods of Arkansas. Now, you talk about a bad idea on many levels, right?
Right.
Well, the problem is, this cat, a tiger is never tame, but it had been living a domestic lifestyle where it was fed its entire life. It didn't know how to hunt.
Well, and it was fed by humans.
Right. Well, what's interesting is he came home from work or somewhere about several days later, and it's laying on his front porch. It had made its way all the way back somehow and found home, and because it couldn't make it in the wild. So as an example, a lot of people don't think about these cats don't know how to hunt. They're not going to be successful out there, and almost all exotics that do get away are captured or shot, unfortunately, very quickly after it happens. And so I don't buy into that particular theory much at all.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a combination of all of the above. It's kind of my opinion. But we go into all that in the book.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Is there any connection, do you think, with I know, like I mentioned the Beast of Exmoor, like in the UK. I don't know if there's some anywhere else in the world. Do you think there's any connections at all, or is that a different phenomenon?
I think over there, some of it is escaped exotics over there, but I think they're the progeny of long ago escaped. I think back in the 40s, a lot of these military units had mascots, and some of them were big cats, and I think some of those were turned loose at the end of the war. I think there have been some other kind of shady incidents where cats have been released. But one thing I didn't go into a minute ago that I think could be playing into this as well is feral cats. And people like, oh, come on, that's just a regular house cat. And genetically, that's true. But there's a chapter in the book about feral cats in Australia and what a problem they've become. And a feral cat's a wild animal. It is not a domestic cat. Genetically, it's catus, just like grandma's cat, right? But a feral cat has been born in the wild. It has never had any, interaction or been cared for by humans. It's a wild animal, and as an invasive species, if it's in an area that has no natural predation for it, it's going to dominate. And that's what's happened in Australia. Years ago, apparently, when the Dutch found Australia, a bunch of rats got off the ships and overran the continent. Well, in their wisdom, the Dutch said, we have a solution. We'll turn a bunch of cats loose on the continent. Well, they devastated the wildlife, birds and amphibians and lizards. And they did eat a lot of the rats too. But so these offspring through the decades appear to be getting, at least in some cases, bigger. And the research for the book, found out that if there's no predation, if there's nothing to keep it in check, there's no reason it won't, over time grow bigger and bigger. And there've been a couple of cats over there that have been shot that were the size of small leopards, 5 feet nose to the tip of the tail, and it's a domestic cat, but it's 5 feet from nose to tail. And anyone who saw that, especially briefly, a road crossing kind of a thing, they wouldn't think, oh, kitty cat. They're thinking that's a black panther. And if that can happen there, I don't see why it couldn't be happening here in the States as well, or the UK. Every little town's got a dog catcher, but cats just kind of get free reign to do what they want, and they go where they want. And we do have some coyotes and things like that over here that would prey on them to some degree, but cats are smart and they're survivors. And so if it can happen over there, I don't see why that couldn't be part of the equation here as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thanks for that. So then maybe we can get to the Sasquatch talk here. So I'm wondering then, so with the title of the book, right, it's Valley of the Apes, and it's the Area X. And I get Area X is an anonymous area, but I wonder if you can kind of give us an overview of what it's like, kind of
what it's like,
more detail.
What it's like in Area X. Well, Area X is in the Ouachita Mountain Range that it actually runs east to west, which is unusual for mountain ranges here in the States. Most run north to south. The Rockies, the Appalachians, they all run north to south. The Cascades and so forth. It kind of straddles the border between Arkansas and Oklahoma. Again, a lot of people, when they picture Oklahoma, they don't picture forest and mountains. They think prairies and flat, and certainly most of the state really does look like that. But it's in the Ouachita Mountains. Really, Area X is the Ouachita Mountain Range. Now, when I was in the NAWAC, we were in a specific valley where we felt we had located a population of these animals. Heavily wooded, deciduous forest, a lot of hardwood trees, a lot of nut-bearing, fruit-bearing trees. You have black walnut, you've got, hickory nuts. You also have a lot of greenbrier growing, which is this thorny, viney thing. But you can eat it. It's the shoots of it are soft and you can eat, and you can also pull it by the roots. It's very starchy, almost looks like a potato when you pull it up. There are muscadine grapes that grow wild. And it's just teeming with wildlife. It's crawling with black bears. They're everywhere. And so that tells you it's a very healthy environment. So that's where Area X is. We got zoomed in on it years ago when a member named Alton Higgins was contacted about some sightings, and he went to investigate. And one thing led to another. He asked a guy, he said, if it was you, where would you go? And the guy pointed to a map and he said, I would go here. He says, but I don't know how to get there because it was so remote. It's probably the most remote. Well, I know I'll just speak on a personal level. It's the most remote place I've ever been east of the Rocky Mountains. It's the valley where we were doing most of our work. I think it was 7 miles from the nearest road that had blacktop, and even longer than that to get to true pavement. It was really isolated, and I think people don't realize there's places like that left, especially in the middle of the country. Everybody knows Bigfoot's in the Pacific Northwest. Everybody knows that, right? but they think that's it, and it's not true. There's a long history going back there. As I researched for the book, and as we did our research about the area before committing resources to it, it goes back to the 1800s. It goes back to the Choctaw. It goes back to the Cherokee, and they've always been there. And it's just not talked about much for some reason. It's not too far. You've probably heard of the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek. That's a big Bigfoot fandom, kind of a deal. A lot of researchers claim, okay, that's what influenced me to look into this more. They watched that, scared them to death when they were 12 or something. It did me, the thing reaching through the window. And that occurred in the area around Falk, Arkansas. And of course, Arkansas and Oklahoma are just right there together. It's not too far at all. So these animals are not confined strictly to the Pacific Northwest. They are basically what I tell people. Find that there's a pretty well-known satellite image of the United States, over North America, really, a photo taken by satellite at night. And you can see all the cities lit up. And they said, where should I go to research? I said, find the black spots where there's no light. Go there. Right. And because those are your isolated pockets. And
well, I know the exact photo you're talking about. And what's really striking is that you see like the Northeast and it's just lit up, right? It looks like a Christmas tree. You get west and you get the coast that's kind of lit up. It does have sparse, but it's lit up. But then you get that middle and it's just
it's few and far between, you know, and anybody that wanted to look at it and look at the Oklahoma, Arkansas area, you could pretty much see the area, the general area. It's just this big black void there. Now, if you can find a big black void that's over heavily wooded or mountainous terrain, all the better, you know. But I think isolation is the number one thing. I think these animals are I think they adapt pretty well. They're very flexible in a lot of ways. You know, they're mammals. You know, if they're real, right? They're mammals. They're covered in hair, and they're primates, and which primates are very smart. And adaptable. And so they're not confined to a certain, you know, specialists get themselves in trouble. Koala bears in Australia. If the eucalyptus trees are all gone, koala bear is going to go. You know, bamboo in China with a panda bear. If it goes, they're gone. You know, mammals are much more resilient. They're much more flexible. And so while it may not be the exact same type of habitat as there is in the Pacific Northwest, I think the forests of the southern U.S. are much richer than the forests of the Pacific Northwest. In the Northwest, you see mostly coniferous forests, you know, pines and cedars and, you know, stuff like that. Whereas in the South, you have these hardwood trees that bear fruit and nuts. And there was a famous researcher named Dr. John Bindernagel. He wrote I highly recommend. He wrote a couple of books on this topic, and they're terrific. He came down and visited Texas. It wasn't area X per se, but he came down and visited South Texas area that we call the Big Thicket. And he said any mammal living here would need much less space than an animal in the Pacific Northwest would, because it's such a rich environment. The food stuff is much more accessible. It's a much denser prey population. And like I said, the nuts, the acorns, just everything that's growing there, you wouldn't need nearly as big a range. And that was one thing a lot of the critics of these animals outside the Northwest say is there's just, that you've got some forests, but they need these huge, vast tracts, and like you have in the Northwest. And Bindernagel said, no, they wouldn't, because the environment is so much richer. And so I don't think they're everywhere people claim them to be, but I do believe they are more spread out than just the Pacific Northwest. And Area X is one of those spots.
Right. Well, you know, and that makes a ton of sense to me, because one of the things I've always thought was a little weird is that like we dismiss people like so quickly. It'll be like a guy that's been hunting all his life, and then suddenly the Sasquatch Chronicles I like to listen to sometimes, and we'll bring people on that's been hunting for 30 years, you know, sees a Sasquatch and it scares him so much he never hunts again, you know, or, you know, I mean, it changes their life.
I've heard a lot of those kinds of stories, and, you know, it's the same. And what I tell people is, you know, I had never seen one either until I did, you know, and it's the same with you. It's the same with anybody else. And some people, you know, I'm big fisherman, love to fish, and want to catch that 10-pound bass, right? I want to catch that you see one it's kind of on the, I'm gonna right back here. That's one of them. I got two up there. But, you know, to catch that trophy, you want to be on the water a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whose odds are better? The guy that's out there 3 or 4 days a week, or the guy who goes out every 4th of July,
Right.
and that's it. Well, certainly the guy goes out on the 4th of July can catch lightning in a bottle and get it. And boy, does it piss people like me off when they do, right? But
Sure.
but the odds are with the guy who's out there a lot. And so um, these people who, oh, I've been 130 years, but then you find out, well, really, they hunt a weekend every year.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really out there all the time, and most people just don't get too far off the road, and that includes hunters. They're or a four-wheeler trail. They'll because whatever they kill, they got to haul out of there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be 8 miles in the back country and try to haul a big buck out by yourself, or a you shoot a 200 or 300 pound hog. You don't want that's a pain, and so most guys just don't get too far away from the roads, the thoroughfares, and whatever these things may be, they don't want to be seen. They retreat deep into that stuff. Now they do cross roads from time to time. Who knows what they're doing, where they're going, what they're up to, but they're going to stay out of sight as much as possible, just like any other wildlife. When you're walking through, how many people walk right by tons of animals and never even know it because they just got still. Sure. That's a big defense mechanism. They just get still, and we are, as a species, notoriously unobservant. A lot of times we see something move, it'll catch our eyes and we'll turn our head. But if it's still, and if you're out in the woods and something vertical just kind of gets still and it's kind of up against another, you're going to very good chance you just walk right by. You don't know.
Especially if you're not looking for it. The criticism I've always thought was a little silly was that, like, when they'll go, like the Patterson Gremlin or Gimlin film, oh, well, they're looking for it. Yeah, I mean, if you may stumble upon something, but the best way to find something is to look for it.
Well, right. Again, it go back to my fishing analogy. Yeah, I'm hunting that big bass, and so I'm more likely to catch it than the guy who shows up once a year. And so it's like these research groups who can't claim sightings. Well, they're looking and they're making an effort to put themselves in the most isolated places possible where sightings have occurred. And how many people do that?
Not a lot.
Many. Most people, the woods are spooky at night. Most people don't like that, and they leave. And
it's uncomfortable, right? You're putting yourself.
Oh yeah, it's very. And the older I get, the less comfortable it is. It's it's hot, it's buggy. There are snakes, or it might be freezing cold too. That happens. And it's sleeping in a bag on the ground, even if maybe you're in a tent, or even if you got a cot. It's very uncomfortable. And I think that's another part of it. I think these animals have become conditioned to know that when humans show up in the area, they're not going to stay very long. All we got to do is hunker down, stay quiet. They're going to leave in a day or two. Now, what led us to the type of research that we did in the NAWAC was we would set these oh gosh, I loathe the term expedition, but that's the term everybody uses, right? But we would set these expeditions, for lack of a better term, up, and we'd set them up on long weekends and things because everybody's got a job and everybody's got to get back to work. And we would call blasts. We would play vocalizations that allegedly came from Sasquatches. We would beat the bushes. We use scent baits. We use just whatever you can think of. We've tried, and nothing. Second night, nothing. And then the third night, the last night, a lot of the time, that's when we would have some kind of crazy activity. That's when something would happen. And we had the discussion many, many times. Man, I wish we had another night. How come everything always happens the night before we have to leave? And so that planted the seed. And I think it was a gentleman named Travis Lawrence who gave voice to it first. It was in the group. Said, maybe this is a deal where if we just stay longer, instead of 20 people going out for a 3-day trip, why don't groups of 3 go for a week each or 3 days each or whatever? And then you stretch your time out that you're actually in the area and you get more bang for your buck, so to speak.
Right.
And so that was how what we started to do. And once we found Area X, we'd send teams of 3-4 people in. They would stay a week. A new team would come in of 3 or 4, relieve them, but we would have a continuous presence in that area week after week for, 10, 12 weeks. And because what we kind of figured is, they'll lay low, they'll hunker down, expecting us to leave 2-3 days, maybe even a week. But after that, they start to lose their patience. And that's when the rock throwing starts. That's when sticks fly into camp. That's when you start to hear growls and hoots and yells and things like that. Because I think at that point now, they're trying to encourage you to leave, right? And of course, 99.9% of the population, you get a rock thrown at you, something screams, bam, you're in the truck and you're out of there, right? And it has worked forever. So our philosophy was, well, what if we don't go? What if we just stay in the pocket? What if we won't go? And the book is about our decades long. We called it the Ouachita Project. And each summer operation, it's how we kind of came to this conclusion I just discussed with you, what we'd done before. And once we found Area X, taking Travis's idea and having these prolonged stays for a decade, and the things that happen.
Brilliant. Yeah, because you see that it was Jane Goodall who did the mountain apes. It was you usually those expeditions, you go out and you live there for some time period, right? Like you don't go for the weekend. You might get lucky on the weekend. But you really want to study them. You have to kind of really set roots. So that makes
right. And these things are much harder to find, and they don't. If you see one, it's an accident. They made a mistake. Or maybe you see it at night through a thermal imager or something like that. But what's funny about them, they act as if you can see them in the dark. They still will slink around and hide behind trees and rocks and lay low to the ground, even at night when we really can't see them. But if we have one of those, a fluorothermal of some kind, they've been observed acting as if it's broad daylight. They're so evasive, so furtive, so cautious. It's just, it's a near impossible task to try to get what would pass as concrete evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would expect that if it's a biological animal that's made it this long without being detected, you would expect it to be pretty elusive, right? Like it does not want to have to deal with people. Because if not, then we would see them, and God knows someone would throw them in a zoo or something else, Awesome. So you mentioned that you had a sighting yourself experience. Do you mind telling us about that?
Sure. It was, if memory serves, 20. Oh gosh, I'm not going to lie to you. It's well over 20 years ago now. And it was in May of that year. It was in the spring. And a friend and I had gone to see a member of the NAWAC speak at an outdoors group that we were part of. And, he talked about Sasquatch and Sasquatch research.
For the audience, could you say that acronym out once? I'll add it to the show, but it's also a podcast. If you can say what in the one you just said, the NCAA. I'm saying basketball now, but
the NAWAC. If you say NAWAC, we don't like that. So we didn't like that. So NAWAC, it is North American Wood Ape Conservancy. And he was a member of that group. And he came to speak at an outdoors group, and we heard him talk, and it kind of rekindled my interest. I grew up, my kid years were in the 70s. And I was kind of right there from the late 70s, early 80s, kind of becoming a teenager and all that. And that's when it was kind of a golden age of Bigfoot stuff. You saw the legend of Boggy Creek, which we mentioned earlier, was a big thing. The $6 Million Man fought Bigfoot on TV, which was the greatest
Right.
event, the greatest event maybe in television history, right? And just it was always an interest. I checked out all the monster books in the library, and just always had this interest in this topic. And you get into college, you get engaged, you get married, you get a job, you get a family, and you kind of forget about it and you leave it behind. So after hearing this gentleman speak, it kind of rekindled that interest. And so we decided, why don't we go some camping trips and we'll let's see what we can see. And so we went to at that time, it was actually called the TBRC, the Texas Bigfoot Research Conservancy. And it later changed to the NAWAC, but we went to their website. They have a database of sightings. And so we just looked, is there anything in Texas, close to us? And there was. We have 4 national forests in Texas in the eastern part of the state. We have a national preserve called the Big Thicket National Preserve, which is a wilderness area, and various spots like that. It's there's a lot more of it than you think there is. And so we just went to their database, tried to find something not too far, terribly far away from us. And we found a kind of a cluster of sightings in the Sam Houston National Forest, not too far from Conroe, Texas, and the north end of Conroe Lake. We said, we'll go there. And so we had made several trips. It was not our first trip out, but we had decided on a strategy. We'll get there. We'll get camp set up. It was on a Friday after work. We drove right after work, and we'll get the tent set up, and we'll sleep for a little while, and we'll get up around midnight, and we'll drive these back roads because a lot of the encounters, a lot of the sightings are road crossings, and we'll drive these old logging roads, these old Forest Service roads, and see what we see. And we were doing that. It was about 3:15 a.m. And we came over. Not much of a hill. It's pretty flat down there, but just a little bit of a rise. And so we were slightly angled down, and my friend was driving, and he was trying, think of Bigfoot hunters in Mazda proteges, but that's what we were in, right? This little tiny car. We took turns driving, and I would drive my truck when we went, but he had a protege, so it was his turn to drive. So that's what we were in. And, but I think it might have actually played in our favor because it was a very quiet little car.
Sure.
And anyway, I had
take the Teslas up there now.
Oh, that's not a bad. We actually tried golf carts one time, battery powered golf carts one time. For that very reason. But so I had spent $100 on a Gen 1 night vision monocular. It was the biggest piece of crap you've ever seen in your life. It was worthless. But I was determined. I was looking at the passenger side, trying to get some use out of it. And he was driving, and he brought the car to a pretty quick stop. I kind of rocked forward, and I just turned. I said, "What?" And he's just pointing. He said, "What's that?" I said, "What?" He goes, "What's that?" And I turned and look, and standing in the road about 40 yards in front of the vehicle is an upright figure. Now we're on a slight incline, so his little car was pretty low to the ground anyway, and the headlights are, since we're on this incline, that they're kind of pointed downward a little bit, and the bottom half of this thing was fairly well illuminated, but the top half was more like a silhouette kind of effect. Wasn't as well lit, but you could see it was a kind of a reddish brown. I describe it as if you ever watch these Hershey's commercials around Christmas, or these chocolatier commercials where they're pouring melted chocolate. It was about that color, like long dead pine straw, not the bright orange, freshly dead, as Monty Python would say, right?
Sure.
But long dead pine straw, deep orangish brown, reddish brown. And you clearly see 2 legs, and it was just standing there. It was kind of 3/4 to us. It's almost like it was kind of, partially turned to us, but not head on, and kind of leaned forward looking at it. And it took a little sidestep crossed over with its other foot. One more step, it stepped across a bar ditch that ran along the roadside, and it was in the woods and was gone. But it was clearly on two legs. It was clearly covered in hair.
Right.
And, you struggle with, well, what else could that be? And people say, oh, it's a guy in a suit. He's out there messing with you. Well, nobody knew where we were going to go. Right. Nobody, it couldn't have been a hoax targeted solely at us. And the other thing is, I point out to people in Texas usually don't make that assertion because they know this. This is Texas, and there's a gun in every car, every truck, every vehicle. You want to jack with people, run around in a monkey suit in the woods, you're literally taking your life in your hands down here.
Right.
And then to run off into the woods in a monkey suit, this is thick stuff. With a mask on, a full ape suit kind of a thing. It's just not plausible to me. Right. And so I think it's more believable that it was the animal that we went looking for. And we did a recreation of it later. And I described it initially as, it was man-sized. It didn't look huge to me like all these stories you hear. It wasn't just obviously a giant, right, or anything. I said, look, it was about the size of a man in the road, which of course led to more speculation. Could it have been a man in the road? But we went back with a friend of mine named Daryl Collier, and he said, okay, we're going to recreate this. And he says, I want you to, okay, you stop here, you sit where you were sitting. I'm going to walk out. You stop me when I'm about, and of course it's approximate, right? But it's in the neighborhood of where this thing was. And I'm like, as we talked about earlier, I'm an old football coach. I've been in lots of 3rd and 40s. So I know what it looks like, And so what struck me was, while this thing wasn't super, super tall, Daryl, my friend, he's about 5'11". He'll tell you he's 6 foot, but he's not. He's about 5'11", right? Right. And this thing would have been about a head taller than him, which was at 6'9", 10, approaching 7 feet high. But what was really impressive was that as Daryl was standing there, he looked so skinny. He looked so small. This thing, if he had been standing there and it was behind him, it would have been hanging out on either, you would have seen it on either side of him. And I was like, there's no way that was a dude. There's no way that was a man. And that kind of sealed it for me that was the real deal. And I've kind of been chasing them ever since.
Yeah, sure. You know, it reminds me when you were saying that was that one of the years that Shaq and Kobe won the title, they were taking a picture, and Shaq, who's like, as humans go, like the closest to a Sasquatch you can get, right? Because he's not only tall, but he is just massive, right? He is, it's just a complete abnormally of a human. But he was on a knee, and he was next to Kobe and Phil Jackson, all these guys that are 6'6", Robert Ory, like 6'10", and even though some of them were a little taller, they still look tiny. Because he's so broad and everything. And that's the thing, is like, how many Shaqs do you have? Is he out there roaming the forest to give you that?
And how many costume shops carry an ape suit that would fit a 7 foot tall, 400-pound man?
Right.
Maybe they've got an ape suit, but I mean, you're talking awful big. So, like I said, to me, it's more plausible. It's less plausible rather that it was some guy in a monkey suit than it was that it's just this animal that we were actually out there trying to get a look at.
Sure.
And so that's how it happened for me. And I've caught glimpses here and there in Area X. I've never had a look at one like that again since then. That was in 2005. And little flashes here and there of what I believe. I'm pretty sure that's what that was, but it was just it was gone. And so that road encounter was unusual in the length. It was about I don't know, it was several seconds, which doesn't sound like much, but you talk about 1001, 1002, 1003, and it's gone. That's still, a pretty long time to get a look at something. And that's how it happened for me.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Thanks for that. I wonder then, because there's the Patterson. Is it Gremlin or Gimlin? I always like mix up the name here.
Gimlin. It's Gimlin.
Gimlin.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the most famous one. I think of all time, pretty
sure
by hands, by miles. Is there any other film that you think's worthwhile for people to check out? Anything else that's pretty provocative?
Yeah. I think the Freeman footage is very compelling. A guy named Paul Freeman took this footage, and there are mixed feelings about Paul Freeman. I think he gets a bad rap. I won't get into the whole thing. A lot of it's very petty nonsense stuff. But he, people say, oh, every time he went out, he saw one, because he had all these. I don't know how many casts he had of footprints and handprints. Of course, the count is, well, almost all those casts are from the same trackway. It was the same event. It's not like he saw one every time he went out. But anyway, the Freeman footage is, I think, very compelling. The animal looks absolutely enormous, and it does move in a little more of a, what I would call a ponderous way than what I saw. Was very smooth and quick, and it does kind of it just seems totally unconcerned, but it looks absolutely enormous. I think there's a possibility that that's the real thing. There's some footage from the Honey Island Swamp in Louisiana. It was shot by a guy named Harlan Ford, that I think might be real. He shot it. He had an encounter with what they called the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and this was back in the 60s or early 70s. And he kind of became obsessed after that with bringing this thing in, hunting it, getting it on film, so on. And he did this for years and years and years, despite the ridicule that he got for it. He never profited anything from his stories and things like that. And so he ended up passing away, and his family, one day in the attic, cleaning out some of his things, came across a box that had some 8mm film in it. And they found the footage of this bipedal something walking through the swamp. And he had never said anything about it to anybody. He had never publicized it. He'd never tried to sell it. He never said anything to anyone about it. Now, why? Did he think it wasn't of high enough quality? Skeptics will say, well, because he knew it was a hoax, and that's why he didn't do it, but to me, the fact that he had this, what I think is pretty compelling footage, and never attempted to profit from it, I think that's a tally mark on the plus side in my mind. Sure. Now, what was his intention? Was he ever going to go public with it? I don't know, but I think there's a chance that could be real. There are some photographs that were taken on the Arapaho Cheyenne Indian Reservation near Concho, Oklahoma, that I believe to be the real deal. Those are on the North American Wood Conservancy website. You can view those. Okay. There was a cleanup crew. They had a big powwow the night before, and it was in this wooded area. And there was a cleanup crew the next day out picking up the trash and the leftover stuff. And one of the guys he was taking a picture of his fellow crewmen out there. They're just kind of conning around, and they catch over their shoulder through a little window in the vegetation this enormous thing. And there are two different photos. It's in profile in one, and then the other it has turned its head and is looking back to get. Now, of course, there's a leaf right in the middle when it's turned its face. But
sure.
A good friend of mine named Alton Higgins they did recreations. They went out there with the photographer and the witnesses, and whatever this thing was, it was enormous. It was to be seen through that particular window of vegetation from where that guy took the picture, it was well in excess of 7 feet high. And again, you mentioned Shaq, just how the broad, how bulky this thing was, amazingly bulky. And I believe those are the real deal.
Sure.
I find myself not putting a whole lot of stock in much of anything in recent years because of the advent of Photoshop, and now AI has really clouded the waters. It's awful hard to not have doubts about anything that comes out right now. I don't. So I don't know how we get past that. But those pieces of footage, I think, and those photos, I think, very well could be real.
Right. Did you see the one there was?
And I took one. I'm forgetting myself. It's on the cover of the book. Now it is not in great detail. Okay. This is to show the photo, not just to pander the book. Okay. So,
well, very good.
Right. That right there.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I saw the cover of the book.
I took that photo in the Sam Houston National Forest. My visual was in May of 2005. I took that in August of 2005. Less than half a mile where the visual occurred. That was down in some river bottoms, creek bottoms, with the saw palmettos all growing. It's very thick. There's hog sign everywhere. I was there with my brother. It was miserably hot, August in Texas, right? Shocking. And we were hiking around, and we stopped just to kind of rest for a minute. We'd heard some hogs, and we wanted to go see if we could get a look at them. And so we had wandered away from camp, and we were just sitting there catching our breath a little bit. And I heard something back behind him. And this was, matter of fact, it was a 35 millimeter film camera. It was not even a digital camera. And at the time, and I caught a flash of movement over his shoulder. I couldn't have told you what it was, right? Something moved. And I had the camera around a string around my neck, ready to go. And I just picked it up and clicked the button over his shoulder. And that's the picture I got. I didn't see that with my own eyes. And of course, took Walgreens two weeks to develop it before I even knew I'd gotten anything, right? Because this was the old days. This is old school. But we heard something moving away through the forest. Now, at the time, we said, it must have been one of the hogs, right, that we had seen. But I'd caught a flash of something, snapped that picture, later saw that. And whatever it is, it's upright. It's not low like a hog would be. It's clearly upright. And that dark shape, when we went, and we tried to follow whatever it was a little bit, and that thing was not there, that dark shape. People say, oh, that's a tree. No, it wasn't there. Now, you have to take my word for it, right? But I think if you study that, you can kind of see a sloping back, and then kind of this big bubble butt sticking out, which, if you watch the Patterson-Gimlin footage, you see that. And now, maybe it's just my most favorable interpretation, being the photographer, but I believe that that's what that was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, sure. No, I understand completely. Did you see the one there was, I think it was Colorado, like some people took it on a train?
Oh, yeah, that's a fake. That's a fake. There's a lodge or something, some kind of lodge up there. They've actually got the suit and everything. They apparently do that for the train to give people a little shot of adrenaline. But yeah, that one's fake. It's now Matt's the one who sniffed that out. Matt
really? Yeah. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I mean, it strikes you as a fake, but that's what's so sad about it now, right? Like you were talking about AI, just the faking, just it's so hard to I'm afraid anymore.
You're going to have to capture footage of one doing something extraordinary that a person couldn't do. I don't mean like, Superman stuff, but just, it's going away from you and it jumps across a creek. And that creek, you've got that footage and you see it go over that creek, and you can measure now the width of that creek, right? And if it's, if it's 18 feet across the creek or something, you're talking about a world-class long jumper rather, and that you get close to 20 feet, Joe Hillbilly in an ape suit ain't jumping 18 feet across a creek.
Right.
If you could get close-up footage of one maybe eating something where you could see the lips, you could see the manipulation of vegetation, like you've seen chimps drag, they'll dip it for ants and pull it through their lips. One with a small one, something unusual. You would have, other than just something walking through the forest, I think is what's going to have for it to even have a chance to be taken seriously.
Right.
But unfortunately, I just don't put much stock in anything that I see these days.
Sure. And I think I know just from the cover you showed us, and I saw it on your website, when I looked earlier anyways, but where do you fall on the debate whether one of the animals should be killed or not?
Well, I believe that to prove the species is real, a body is going to be required. That is pretty much how science works. All these documented species that we know of, a specimen was taken. Okay. Now, having said that, I understand why people wouldn't want to do that. But I think that's what's going to take everything we just talked about with the photography, the right. Photoshop, the AI. If that's never going to be good enough, there's only one thing that will be, and that's either a whole animal or a piece of an animal. People say, no, you could just put some kind of DNA trap or whatever. But the way DNA works is there's a database. Right? There's a gene bank. There's a database where all known species have been cataloged, and it has to be tested and retested. It has to be repeatable by other scientists to get the same result before it makes it into that data bank. And the best you can hope for with a piece of DNA evidence is that it would come back as unknown, because what they do is they compare it to the known animals in the bank. And I believe that has happened. But we don't know what it is. Doesn't prove what it is. And now maybe if you pair that with some super compelling footage or something, maybe, I don't know. I spoke at the Texas Bigfoot Conference last October, and Dr. Maria Mayor was there. She's from Expedition Bigfoot, the TV show. And she doesn't think it's necessary. And she points to her experience in Madagascar with lemurs. She discovered a new species of, I think she called it the teacup lemur. I could be wrong, but it's this tiny little lemur. And first of all, and I understand. She took it, they photographed it, they took some samples off of hair. I don't remember if they got blood samples or not. They probably did, but scrapings, little tissue samples, and they put it back up on the branch. That they were able to get back to it because it was just holding onto the branch, just terrified, right? And I don't think it's. I see her point, but if you're going to, first of all, this animal's not going to just stand there while you come and do experiments on it. Secondly, as far as believability, we know lemurs are real. So a new subspecies or species of lemur, did you read about it? Because I didn't, right? It's not going to make headlines. It's not going to make the news. And she's a legitimate, hardcore scientist. Her credentials are, it's much more impressive than I knew before I met her. She's the real deal now. But I disagree with her that I don't think it's apples to apples. When you're talking about something as crazy as a North American ape, that there's nothing else like that here. It's not like another. Oh, that's a subspecies of bison. Oh, okay.
Right, well, we know bison.
We know bison are here. We know they're real. So I disagree with her on that point simply because of that. I think it's such a revolutionary thing that you're going to have that hardcore proof, and you're going to have that specimen somewhere where scientists from around the world can come and repeat the DNA sequencing and get the same result. And it's unfortunate, but in the news the last couple of years, these new primates have been discovered. Do you know how? They shot them out of trees. They don't tell you that part, but that's what happened. They shot them out of the tree they were in, hauled them back to the lab, and they did all the dissections and the studying and the DNA and the blood. And it's unfortunate. I can see why people are against it. Now, nothing would make anyone happier than if some researcher somewhere stumbled across the body of a 90-year-old Sasquatch old man that died of a heart attack peacefully in his sleep, right? And that way
watching his grandkids Sasquatch play.
That way, we have what we need. No animal was taken before his time, but the reality of that ever happening is pretty slim, And now I will say this: I've come to realize the difficulty of the endeavor of trying to hunt these things, and I was a proponent of it for a long time, and I am, at least in Area X, I'm no longer a proponent of it. I think what we should be doing is trying to get footage and video. I think you hate to have to think this way, but you think about legalities of hunting something on two legs, and
and what if it is that one jackass, right? That decided to go roam around in a suit. You just never. Right. I think there was a case where someone got hit by a car doing that. Right?
Yeah, they did. That was up north. I want to say it was in Idaho or Montana or somewhere like that. That did happen. And it's unlikely where we were, but we see more people. We started to see more people than we used to see. And it just, there were a couple of incidents where nothing came close to actually bad happening, but people popped up where and when we're like, what in the world, where did this guy come from? And how did he get here? And it just, the legalities of it. And at that time I was chairman of the organization, and I just, who's going to get blamed for this if something goes wrong? They're out there with the okay of the board of directors, of which I'm the figurehead of, right? And so I've kind of shied away from that simply because, you can push that button on the camera, and if you're wrong, no big deal, right? Oh, well, that's a bear. What's wrong? Oh no, that's whatever. But once you send around, you can't get it back. And I think a specimen is absolutely a necessity. So I don't want to try to be disingenuous here. I think that's what it will take to prove that it's real.
Sure.
I just no longer want to be the one to do it. And I'm not a proponent of hunting it in that particular location anymore. I don't fault those who still want to. I just don't want to be responsible for any mistakes that someone else might make, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to badmouth it. And I don't mean that to degrade anyone else. I just, I've been called paranoid. And I've been, you've just been spooked by lawyer talk and things like that. I don't believe that to be the case. I feel like I feel, and and if someone else doesn't feel that way, that's okay, But
well, and I've heard just so many encounters where people are like, it felt so human. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, you could shoot it, and then even if it's legally okay, it may not, how that sits on your conscience. Like that may not feel the same way.
Yeah. I think as far as, I think the fear of it, people say, oh, you're going to be prosecuted. What if it turns out to be a primitive man? You'll be prosecuted for murder. I don't think that's true. I think
I don't think so either.
I think all you would have to do, even if it ever got to a trial situation, courtroom situation, you'd bring the jury to the morgue where the thing is. You look at this and tell me,
right,
that, I mean, genetically it may be a relative or something. I just don't think anybody would convict on that. I really don't.
Would go through the prosecution of it, but
yeah, I don't think so either. I think now, but a mistake of another kind could be just absolutely tragic on many levels, and it could also just ruin you financially. It could ruin your reputation, and it's just so. I think it has to be done. I think there are probably places in the country or on the continent where it can be done safely. I'm not 100% sold that where we had been for all those years. I think for a time, I think it was safe, and I still think it's mostly safe. But you're talking about, there's no room for error there with that, and so again, I'm a proponent that a specimen is needed, but I would rather leave it up to someone else to collect that. We'll shoot video and cameras and and stuff like that. But again, there are those who disagree with me and think, no, we're going to keep doing it and we're going to get this done. And I wish them nothing but the best. I don't want anything bad to happen. But maybe I am paranoid. I don't know, but I got a wife.
Well, I don't think I got
a wife and kids. I got family. So it's just someone else can roll those dice. That's all.
Right. Yeah. No, I think I agree with you, and I think when Matt was on, he kind of felt the same. I think you're probably right. The one thing that makes me think that maybe you don't need a specimen to kind of start swaying public opinion is, we talked about, like, you were a kid like 70, you remind me so much of my brother. I feel like we're, family here, but I was a kid in the 80s, right? And when I was into UFOs and things too, and that was crazy town, right? Everyone thought you were a nut. Oh, there's no UFOs. Now that the government came out and said, oh, there's this videos, we don't know how this is, and kind of released it, and they let some people actually talk about them. I think if you had that agency authority saying, oh, we think there's actually Sasquatch, people would turn around pretty quickly into believing that such a creature could exist.
That I agree with. But it would have to be the government or the Smithsonian or National Geographic or somebody like that to do it. And they, for the most part, it's 10-foot pole territory. They just don't want any part of it. They don't want to be associated with it. I think there's been a little bit of a thawing. It used to be, I think, career suicide for these guys to get involved, and they risk tenure. And again, they're trying to feed their families too, and they don't want to ruin their reputation or whatever the case may be. I think there's been a little bit of a thaw in that regard, not as far as I would like to see, but hopefully we'll get to that point. And I think you're right. If that were to happen, this video was taken on an army base in Washington State and was witnessed by this whole group of guys out on patrol or whatever. And we don't know if that were to happen, I think you're absolutely right. And, it hasn't happened yet. And I'm not really encouraged
which is,
it will.
Yeah. And I don't, I know we're running up. I get talking about Sasquatch. This is what happens. I get too excited. So I don't want to keep you forever here. I know it's a little late on your end, but to wrap it up before we kind of hit our shot section here, I think it's really funny that people are like, the government, not that you shouldn't trust the government, but you shouldn't trust the government too. So some skepticism,
you're right.
Versus your fellow people, it's like maybe listen to your fellow people more than the government.
I can tell you right now too, in my lifetime, I think this is the most dubious people have been about their government in my lifetime. I think and it's not a Republican or a Democrat thing, it's a government thing. I think most people don't believe anything they say, and the conspiracy theory industry has exploded since COVID. And whether you think all that stuff's silly or believe it 100%. I mean, there's just a real lack of trust in our own government right now. I do think, though, that coming out and saying something like the UFO thing, the UAP thing, it's so out of character, right, that it's completely not what you would expect them to say. I think that's what has kind of made people, okay, see, we're not crazy. There is something to it. Of course, there's still that portion of people out there like, okay, why are you saying this now? Mm-hmm. Why now? They don't do anything without some kind of agenda, right? And so you get into that too. And I think it would be the same thing here. But I do think that would go a long way. I do, if they came out and said something vaguely supportive of the possibility that, this is a real entity, a real biological being. But I don't think that's going to happen. I just really don't.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it's going to happen. You can hope.
Yeah, for various reasons. Because I agree with people who say, if they're out there, they know it. There's no way the government doesn't know it if they're out there. And I think that's probably true. I think the economic impact of such a discovery would be tremendous. I mean, think about what happened with the spotted owl. What a mess. What a mess that was, right? It would be times 100. You're talking about an ape with slow gestation periods and slow, it takes years and years to mature. I mean, like I said, times 100. And I don't think anybody wants to deal with it. I think it would take.
Well, and the second you said it's our closest living cousin, kind of like, it would be like, no more paper, no more nothing, like leave the mountains alone, like leave our cousins be. So
yeah, there's all kinds of implications, and I won't say unintended consequences, but consequences that I don't think anyone's thought of yet or thought about yet.
For sure.
And I just think it's a management issue as much as anything, a money and a management issue. And I think there probably are people who know, but they're not hurting anybody. No one, and it's just, we'll just ignore it and not comment they don't comment one way or the other.
Right. Yeah. So last cryptid question. So is there, because you have the website, is there any other besides, so Sasquatch is by far the most popular one, right? Especially in the States here, right? He's on beef jerky commercials. Sure. Is there, and we talked about the black cats, but is there any other cryptids that you think, or maybe, deserve mentioning, that's something interesting for people to research?
Well, the chupacabra thing is a big thing down here in the South in Texas. And it's funny, the original chupacabra legend came to us from Puerto Rico. And it was this weird reptilian, alien looking thing, right? And somehow over the years, it's morphed into this hairless dog, canine looking creature, right? And I've actually seen in Texas, we called them blue dogs because they had this kind of bluish gray elephant looking skin. And I saw one. I've seen one of them, but it came kind of staggering out of the forest. It was clearly unhealthy. It was, in my opinion, obviously a coyote or a fox that had mange and was sick. It was not a healthy move. You could tell by the way it moved. It was not a healthy animal. But if I'd taken a picture of that chupacabra sighting, it would have been everywhere, And so I think there's a basis for that particular myth, legend, whatever you want to call it, cryptid.
Well, I think there was one too. I think it was in Texas where a lady had, I don't think she shot it, but she found it dead, and they said it was road killed.
Yeah, it was road killed, and the genetics came back. It was a hybrid between a Mexican gray wolf and I guess a coyote. And it is a weird looking thing, but there's a meme that kind of illustrates this point. Well, it's a bear with no hair. It is bald, and it is the most terrifying thing you've ever seen in your life,
Sure.
and it's unrecognizable.
Right.
So when you remove the fur, the hair from a usually hair covered animal, they look so alien and so foreign and freaky that I think you don't recognize them. Now, she's got this thing mounted. It's a real animal, and I don't doubt that the genetic test. There's some weird things about it. It's got these weird kind of calloused areas on its rear end, and it's kind of the way it's built is kind of funny. And it's one of these things. Whether it's a mutation or a hybrid, nature's not real kind to most mutations. If it's something that's deleterious to the species, it's not going to be allowed to live very long. So this could have been that particular specimen she has might have been a one-off. This is a mutated whatever, and maybe the reason it got hit is because it wasn't healthy enough to get out of the way. And I don't know. She also had part of that story. She had a bunch of chickens that were getting killed, and so something was doing. It could have been this thing very easily, and but I tend to think at least most of those sightings are some sort of canid with sarcoptic mange, but they're around. You will see them from time to time. Now, my current project, I'm working on a book, and it's lesser known cryptids.
Okay, awesome.
So Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, the Yeti, they're the superstars. Everybody knows.
Right.
Everyone's heard of Champ at Lake Champlain, right? But there's a whole lot of more regional things out there, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of different kinds. We got lake monsters to Bigfoot-like creatures to what in the world could that have been? These weird sightings of these things, and I kind of make a call as to what are the chances that this could have been something real? Is this mistaken? I kind of look at it and think, here's some candidates for possible misidentification. But in some cases, you just boil it down to they either saw what they said they saw, or they're just lying. And in all these years I've been doing this between the Panthers and the Sasquatch research, and it's over 20 years now, or right at 20 years now. I think I've only been flat out lied to twice in all those years. I've talked to people who were mistaken, who I think, made a mistake, misidentified something. There was a lady in East Texas. I saw a Bigfoot. I saw it, and I said, well, tell me about it. And she said, well, it was on all fours when it came out of the woods. It was this big, black, massive thing. I said, okay, what happened next? She goes, well, it got to the middle stripe in the road, and I brought my car to a stop so I wouldn't hit it. And it stood up, and it kind of did this, and then it dropped back down, and it went off on four legs again to the other side of the woods. I said, tell me about the face. She goes, well, it was dark all over, but it was kind of a tan color on the face. I said, okay, tell me about his nose. Was it like a nose like we have, or was it a kind of a pointy nose? It's like, it was kind of pointy. It was kind of long and pointy. Well, she saw a black bear. But what's funny is black bears have been gone from East Texas so long that the population that's alive now has never seen one, not in the wild, right? And it's odd to think that people are more familiar with Bigfoot than they are with a black bear. But in that particular little pocket of Texas, it's true. There used to be black bears all over, but they were hunted out in like the 1930s. So nobody's alive now has had experience with wild black bears in East Texas. Now they're starting to creep back in now, and that was kind of the beginning of it. So she wasn't lying. She did see something that stood up on two legs and looked at her and examined her and then went on its way. But I believe she was mistaken. And sometimes people accept that, and sometimes, oh no, you're wrong, you weren't there, which that's okay, because I wasn't. Maybe I am wrong, but I think in all likelihood, I think been right most of the time, because you see something like that, and I'm guilty of it too, because of what I saw. You're emotionally invested, and
Mm-hmm.
so I get it. It's okay. I don't get upset with anybody who disagrees, but on that particular case, that's a perfect example of one where I think someone
Right.
misidentified a known animal.
Well, I think it'd be disingenuous to like not think no one like ever misidentifies things, right? Like we know
Right.
people witnessing crimes misidentify like, victims and, perpetrators and everything all the time. So if you try to say every single one was genuine, that would be just as disingenuous as to say
absolutely.
no one's ever witnessed anything.
And I think it was John Green who was kind of, I don't know. I wouldn't say he was necessarily the first Sasquatch investigator, but he was the first one to become kind of well known for it. I think you've heard of the Four Horsemen, Sasquatchery. He was one of them. And I believe it was him who said, out of 10,000 historical sightings, if even one of them is real, is legit, that means there's an animal out there that we don't know about. Just one of them is all it takes to be real. And when you look at the bulk of sightings that have come in, everybody a hoaxer? Is everybody on drugs? Is everybody drunk? Is everybody a liar? And the answer to that obviously is no. And I do have some sympathy for like the park rangers and people because I worked for the Texas Park and Wildlife one summer as a kind of seasonal help, trying to, us rich teachers, I needed to make a few extra bucks when my daughter was in college. So I worked at a state park and, you get calls all the time. There's a mountain lion in my backyard and it's a bobcat. The people don't know their wildlife anymore, and people rarely get off the concrete. So that they do get a lot of. I see why they're not real open to it because they get a lot of those kind of calls, and so I get where they're coming from. But again, everybody, and some of these sightings are made by wildlife officials, by policemen who are trained observers, by game wardens. I mean, everybody's not inexperienced. And so kind of leave it there, I guess. But I think there's something out there that remains to be discovered. So I think it has been discovered because people are seeing them. But I think, as far as being proven, I think that work needs to be done. I think it's there to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Awesome. So transitioning, are you ready for some shots?
Sure.
Okay, very good.
Oh, you mean questions?
No, I meant shots too. If you have the bottle there, we'll do both. So rapid fire questions.
All right.
And in the spirit of you being a middle school teacher for all these years, I'm going to do this in the show because we've had actually, my son's his last year of middle school right now. He's in 8th grade. So we've had 3 go through middle school. We have one that's there. And I always remembered Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. So I wanted to do a special edition.
My girls watch that. Yes, absolutely. I remember it well.
Very good. So I want to do a special edition of Monster Hunter Declassified questions. So
fair enough.
So first one here. It's the first day of monster hunting school. What supplies do I need?
You need a lot of bug repellent.
Oh, very good.
Now, and actually, specifically, I would say permethrin to treat your clothing because ticks, they carry Lyme disease and all kinds of nasty stuff. So you want to try to keep those off of you if possible. You do want to stay away from the offs and things like that because of the scent. You want to invest in some scentless deodorant, things like that. You want to buy the Hunter's soap and things like that. And I'd even recommend the clothes you're going to wear while you're out. Find some cedar branches or something and pack them in a trunk full of cedar and things like that, so you have a more natural scent when you're out moving about.
Very good. It was funny when we were talking about it.
You got to have a camera,
And
obviously.
the camera, yep, yep. It's funny when you're talking about it. I was like, man, we must smell really weird actually when we go out. Like if you're the creatures out there, we must be like this.
Oh,
weird,
I think we stand out like a sore thumb. I just I've been around, and ladies, don't be offended by this because we men have our own issues, but this particular one is more y'all's. Like perfume, and it just
Sure.
And when you're out in that set, you don't notice it so much in town and things like that. But when you're out in the woods like that, you can smell that perfume from 100 yards away. And if that's me, if what can an animal who's much more sensitive to things like that, how far away, so scent's a big deal, but gotta have that camera too.
All right, very good. All right, so next one here. Sasquatch took an embarrassing video of me and it went viral online. What do I do?
It's a hoax. It's AI. It's Photoshop.
Photoshop, yeah, very good. So chupacabra ate my homework. What do I tell Mr. Mays?
Mr. Mays might be the one guy that might buy it. So you might have a shot. But yeah, I would ask you where. And if you said in the backyard of your suburban neighborhood of a town of 100,000 people, then I probably am not going to believe you.
Right. Good note. Good. Make sure you put it out in the wild. And the last one here for the declassified. So the new girl Patty is really cute, but I don't know how to talk to her. How do you talk to girl Sasquatches?
Oh boy, if I knew that, I'd have a picture of one. That's a great question. I'm struggling with that one.
How do you talk to girls in middle school? So my son asked me how he talks to the girl he likes. What do I tell him?
There's nothing you can tell him that's going to help him. They're weird little animals themselves at that age. It's they're at the age where at the school dance, the girls are on this wall, the boys are on this wall, and they end up running around playing tag and chase as opposed to dancing. It's just he's not ready to talk to them yet. He thinks he is, but he's not, and they're not ready to be talked to yet. So, and as far as talking to girls go, he'll never figure out the right way because we don't know how to do it either. We don't.
I know. I'm definitely not the person
continuously making mistakes. Things that I never knew. I'm expected to know. So.
Amen. Awesome. Thanks for that. So that'll be the last declassified question here, but we'll persist on with our shots. What's an irrational fear, and what's something you love irrationally?
An irrational fear of mine? I find all my fears completely rational. Oh boy, I don't know if I really have a wacky one. I had a spider thing. I really, and it came from an experience I had where I stuck my head into a small opening to see what was in a rock face, and what seemed like a billion daddy long leg spiders dropped down on me, and they were just all over me. And I kind of had a problem for a while after that, but I think I've worked my way through that. So I think I'm okay now. A rational fear. I just think the world is kind of a crazy, dangerous place. And I think what's irrational is not to recognize that and to kind of have your eyes open. You're not looking for trouble. And I'm not saying you got to be some kind of bunker guy or anything like that, but just, little things like when my wife and I go out to dinner, I make sure I sit where I can see the door so I can see anybody who comes in. I mean, maybe again, I've been called paranoid for other things. Maybe that's a sign of it. I don't know, but it's just a little something like that.
Sure.
I think the way the world is right now, it's just crazy. I think you should common sense, and you should kind of have a plan, and you live your life. You can't live in fear of anything. You live your life, but you want to have thought about some possible situations on the front end before you're confronted with them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Amen. So Patty versus Dogman, who you got?
Well, I'm not sure about the Dogman stuff. I'll be honest with you. And how crazy it must sound to somebody's. Here's this guy who's a Bigfoot, but he thinks Dogman's silly. That just. And I don't think it's silly. I think I just honestly don't know what to think about it. There are apes in the world. They're in the fossil record. They're on the planet now. But the idea of an upright canine, there's nothing like that out there, and to this point, there's been nothing in the fossil record to indicate it. There's certainly a lot of werewolf folklore from mainly, I think, Eastern Europe, but that kind of that it's not only there. There are these kinds of stories, but and maybe these things are the origin of those kinds of stories, things like that. I don't know, but I don't know what to think about that. I just really don't.
No worries. So you got Patty. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's fighting air. That's I don't know. I'm kidding. I don't know.
No worries. So the next one, even harder. Kobe or LeBron? Who you got?
Kobe all day, every day. And I take MJ and I take MJ over both of them.
I'm with you. We're completely aligned there.
Of course,
everyone
old.
talks
I've
about
seen
LeBron versus MJ, and I'm like, no. I don't know when he passed Kobe. I don't know when that discussion happened. Like, that's hasn't made sense to me. So, are you a Cowboys fan? And if so, what makes the Steelers so good?
The Cowboys, partially. I am. It's kind of hard these days. It's an exercise in frustration. And I think in a way the Cowboys and the Steelers are somewhat in the same boat in that they're never terrible.
Right.
They range from being okay to pretty darn good, never quite good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that does is when it comes to a sport where you have a reverse order draft, right? You're in this no man's land right in the middle or toward the end of the picking order. Right. And so you can't draft that difference maker that you really need to get you over the hump. I think the Steelers historically are a better organization. They're kind of like the St. Louis Cardinals are in baseball. They're always good
comparison,
and they're always in the hunt. Now, the last few years have been pretty rough and been a little out of character in that way for them. And say what you will about the Cowboys, but they've gone 12-5. They've won 12 games 3 years in a row. Now they lose to people they shouldn't lose to in the playoffs. But I don't know what's worse, to be really good and choke, or to just be fairly ordinary all year long. I don't know.
Our claim to fame is not having a losing season with Tom.
Right.
We cling to that desperately.
Yep.
We'll go 8-1
that leaves you in that leaves you in that no man's land though when it comes to draft picks. So
yeah,
I don't know what's
Kenny
worse.
Pickett is what it does.
Cowboys never did that, so there's that. But
yeah, amen.
We did draft Quincy Carter back in the day. That was pretty.
That's true. I remember Quincy Carter. Yeah, he might have been better than Kenny Pickett actually when you look at their careers.
You could make that argument. Yeah. Of course, Kenny's not. In fairness, he's not done yet. He may come around. So
we'll see. Well, I hope he turns it around because he went to Pitt. You hope for him, but not looking good. So last one for our shots here. Favorite podcast, and why is it Writers Drinking Whiskey?
Well, it may be now. I need to go back. I need to go back and get caught up on the backlog. And I had no idea there was such a thing. There's so many podcasts now; it's impossible to keep up. And about the time, and they come and they go. And favorite podcast. I'm partial to one. It was the first one I ever appeared on, and gosh, I'm drawing a blank. These guys are going to be mad at me. Let me pull it up here.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Come on, pop up here. Well, I like Bigfoot and Beyond. Matt's obviously the producer
Sure.
there, so I listen to that. And I what typically happens is I've done a lot of these. I get asked to do these shows, and then I start listening to them afterwards. Because I think, well, they've obviously got great taste in guests, so I should start listening to them, right? So,
Right.
but oh gosh, drawing a blank. You call me unawares. The Sasquatch Chronicles I find very entertaining. I don't buy everybody's story that's on there. There's some pretty crazy stuff. And the thing about Wes, he just lets you tell your story. He doesn't
Sure.
interview. He just lets you tell it. And
Mm-hmm.
um and so but I think that's pretty entertaining. I like true crime stuff. I like outside of this genre. I like a lot of true crime
Right.
stuff. And I like some history podcasts. I couldn't, off the top of my head, tell you what they are, but I've got them saved in my little podcast app there. They pop up when a new show comes on. Sometimes I manage to
Mm-hmm.
listen to them, and sometimes I don't. Um, Teaching school, I come home and eat and go to bed most nights.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm only about 8 or 10 minutes from work. So even if you listen to it in the truck to and from, you're talking about a lot of
Right.
little bitty splice pieces together. But
Mm-hmm.
but but you just made the list, buddy. That's for sure.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for that.
So one of my favorites is Expanded Perspectives. It's the first podcast I was ever invited to be on. It was after my children's book came out. Patty, a Sasquatch Story came out, and those guys had me on. They're fellow Texans. They're pretty funny guys. They've got good senses of humor, and they don't take themselves too seriously. But they're a little bit like Sasquatch Chronicles and West. That they get these accounts and things mailed into them, emailed to them, or sent to them, and they just read them, as they are. And sometimes you're like, "Ooh, man, that's creepy. That's cool." And other times you're like, "Come on, man, how did that even get on the show?"
Right.
must have been a slow week, right? But I'm partial to them. They're great guys, and again, they were the first ones to ever have me on several years back. So they'll always have a kind of special place, right? Because they were the first ones to recognize anything I had done as far as writing, and so I appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. Amen. Yeah, we'll link them all up here. And so we move on. So did you? I think you said you had something you could read to us from it was Life in the Middle.
Yeah. Well, I'll paraphrase a couple stories. I think again, Life in the Middle it's just anecdotes from my time in middle school. There are several stories as a coach. Now, actually, there's a couple stories from when I myself was in middle school too. It's kind of this overview of my whole middle school experience. And there's a chapter, for example, when I was coaching football, and it's pretty standard practice when you're having practice that you don't hit your own quarterback. Right. Friendly fire. We're not going to lose our guy because of friendly fire. Right. And so our school colors were purple and white. And so we had ordered red vest, and we put the red vest on our quarterbacks, and it was hands off the guy in the red vest. Right. And so we had a player one year, and I mean, this kid was like a 14-year-old Adonis. I mean, you just natural, just one of these guys. You bumped into him, it hurt. It was like bumping into the Great Wall of China or something. It was just. But man, he was big. He was strong. He was fast, but he just never could get through his head not to hit the court. We had to put him on defense because he was so overly aggressive, and we to say, hey, on defense, just there's the ball, their ball, get ball, right? Sick them, go get them. That's an oversimplification, but he was just made to play outside linebacker / defensive end, right? And he could rush the passer. You couldn't run a sweep around him. You couldn't run a reverse around him. He just lights up. He was a beast. But he would, when we had team period, he would just forget, and he would just level our own guy, because none of our people could block him, right? And so we're always on his butt. His name was Howard. I was like, God dang it, Howard, and I'd have to go make him run laps or something to try to get through his head. You can't lose it like that. So we had a great year, and we got down to our last regular season game, and the winner got to play in the championship game, right? And so we're playing a team from across town, and it's over at their place, and they're good. They're unbeaten. We're unbeaten, and we were better than the team that we would play in the championship from the other side of town. Whoever won this game was going to win district in all probability, right? So we're all excited. We go over there, and this guy who he just demolished people all year. Just no one could block him. He was just a real problem for everybody. And he's just so passive. He didn't make a play the whole game. And it just, what is going on? And so we're behind like 13-0 at halftime. And this kid, Howard, he hadn't made a play all game. And we're like, what is wrong with you? He goes, oh, Coach, I don't know. I said, yeah, because I'm looking at the guy trying to block. I said, I can't block you. What is wrong with you? What are you doing? And so we go, I'll do better. Okay. So we get the second half, and we get the ball first. We go down the field. We punch it in, and we're down 13-7 now, right? I said, okay, we're going to get a stop right here. And we're going to get the ball, and we're going to go win the game, because we're going to score, and we're going to make the extra point in the game. We're going to win this game. And so they're driving down the field, and they run a couple of sweeps to Howard's side. And he just lets them go. And I'm like pulling my hair out, going crazy. And they're down on about our 25-yard line, somewhere in that neighborhood. That may not be exactly right. And they run a little bootleg. They fake the handoff. The quarterback boots around the other way, and he's looking to throw, but he's booting. He's coming right back to Howard. I'm like, oh, that guy's about to get lit up. They're going to be picking pieces of that boy up for a week, because he's running. Howard's going to hit him right in the mouth. And here he comes. He sees it the whole way. He's playing it perfectly. He comes up, and he gets within about arm's distance from the kid, and then he just stops. And as the kid's running, he just kind of hops like a basketball defensive slide. He just kind of slides with the quarterback, and the kid pulls up, fires a touchdown pass, breaks our back, right? And so we lose like 20-7 or whatever it was. And I can't believe it. I'm livid, and what are you thinking? And I was like, I can't even talk to him. So I got to my assistant. I said, his name was Reggie. I said, Reggie, go talk to Howard. I want you to find out what is he thinking? Why didn't he hit that kid? What is going on with him? I said, I can't talk to him. I'm too upset. Go talk to him. And so Reggie went, and he came back, and I said, and he looks like he doesn't want to tell me. I said, what is it? What did he say? He goes, Coach, you ain't gonna believe it. I said, you know what? It's probably best I don't hear this tonight. Just wait till tomorrow. So we load the kids up on the bus. We go home. The next morning, I've kind of settled down. It's just a middle school game. It's no big deal. I sat down. So I said, okay, Coach, what did he say? And Reggie just kind of shakes his head. He said, Coach, you ain't going to believe it. I said, I know. You told me that last night. Tell me what he said. He said, she said, well, Coach, I asked him, Howard, how come you didn't hit that boy? How come you didn't tackle that quarterback? He says, Coach, I didn't think I could. And Reggie, I said, what does he mean? He said, well, that's what I asked him. I said, well, why not, Howard? Why did you think you could? He said, Coach, he's wearing a red jersey. Their team was wearing red. So the whole game, he didn't make a tackle, because we had drilled into his head, you can't hit the man in the red jersey. And so he didn't hit the man in the red jersey all night long. And that's why we lost that game. And so you'll never hear a high school coach tell a story like that.
Right.
One more funny story is, and I think I told you I was going to read all the PE excuse notes to get out of PE, but this is a great brief. I'll make it brief. We had this little kid in middle school. Sometimes you get these kids come out for football. They really have no business being out there. And this was one of those kids. He was a little short, roly-poly looking guy with these big round glasses. He kind of looked like Larry King, a little tiny 12-year-old Larry King, and he, we had a rule that everybody had to play at least one play. They had to play. They didn't tell you how much they had to play, but just to play. And so usually I'd put this guy, middle school mainly, they run. They don't throw the ball a whole lot. I'd put him at corner on defense, cornerback on our side of the field, where, away from the coach, because the other coach saw this guy out there in the field. They're coming right after him, right?
Uh-huh.
And so he would play one or two plays a game, and that was it. And I think he was happy with that. And he got in trouble one time because he had he had actually left a game in the middle of the game and walked across the street to a Burger King and bought. I mean, again, this is middle school. It's craziness because he played on the B team and they played first, and the A team game would follow. And I sent the boys. They all got to go pee. They all got to go to the bathroom. It's like having 5-year-olds, and they would send them over in groups of 3 or 4. Come back the next group of 3 or 4. And now I got to still coach this game that's going on. They came back. Oh, he left, coach. He left. He went to Burger King. The little fool didn't even get it to go. He sat down over there and ate it in the restaurant in his full gear. And I'm like, I don't even know where he kept his money, right? Where's his money? So he was not allowed to go on road trips anymore because I couldn't trust him, right? And I said, we're an hour. You can't wait an hour to eat. Are you kidding me? So, but I still let him stay on the team for home games. And so we got way out in front of this team. It might have been the last game of the year, and I put him out there at corner. Well, the coach saw him. The other teams go, and they called a sweep coming right at him. And they had this big 6 foot tall, thyroid creature playing running back for him, man among boys. Right. And to this little kid's credit, he stepped up there to play for us and try to, and guy, of course, the kid could have just run around him, but he just lowers his shoulder, and there's this huge collision. And suddenly the air is filled with these brightly colored stuff. I thought it was the kid's guts. I thought he's been disemboweled, he's exploded, and he's just laying on the ground on his back, out cold. And all around him were little like Halloween sized candies of Smarties and Sweet Tarts and Starburst and things like that. It looked like a piñata had exploded on the field.
He just kept him in his uniform from when he turned out
he had removed his thigh pads. And they have little pockets inside the pants where the thigh pads go. And he had removed them and filled them with candy because he knew he was going to get hungry. And somehow when that kid hit him, these things blew out of his pants and they went everywhere, right? And so these are the kinds of stories you get in the Life in the Middle book. And again, the chapter on when I was coaching and teaching PE on the excuse notes I got. If you're old enough to remember Welcome Back, Kotter, you remember the character Epstein. He always had a note from his mom, and it was always signed Epstein's mother, right? I mean, they're right along, and they're worth, I think, the price of the book just to read those. I kept those, the reasons. One 12-year-old, he had a note. It said, "Please excuse," and I'm not going to use his name, from PE today. He had a vasectomy last night. And, this is a 12-year-old. I was like,
right. The 12-year-old vasectomy.
Yeah. And in a little investigation, you found out his dad had one a week before. And I guess he was embarrassed. He didn't really tell the kid what exactly it was. And so the kid thought, well, that's a medical procedure. Coach will believe that. Right. And so stuff like that. And, and again, I had one girl who apparently had her period about 15 times a month, because that was always her reason she wanted to get out of PE. It was just always something. But there's all these notes I kept over the years, and they're fun. They're fun to read. So it's just stuff like really that, funny. Just silly, fun stuff.
Right. Yeah. Now I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the questions I like to ask teachers is like, what's the best, worst excuse you ever got? So we got a few of them there.
Well, the vasectomy, I got one. It was against his religion to practice PE. So I asked him what his religion was. He said Methodist. I'm like, no, you're good. Let's see. Got one. Here's one. Please excuse Rosa from doing PE today. She just got some new skinny jeans and she can't bend over at all or even bend her knees because they aren't broken in yet. So new jeans, can't do that. Oh, here's the one I was thinking about. It says, Coach, my daughter Kayla is on her period. It's so bad it should be called an exclamation point instead. LOL. Seriously, bro, it's really bad. Please let her sit out of PE. Usually parents don't call you bro, right?
Right.
Oh, and then the PS, Kayla says eating Oreos helps her not cramp. So let her eat cookies in the gym while sitting out. So there was that one.
Amen.
Let's see if we got one more good one in here. Oh, here's one. Yeah. To the tall coach. Please let Darren sit out of PE today. He had a vasectomy last night and is too sore to run. So it's a whole bunch of those. It's just we always, you'll hear teachers say you couldn't make this up if you wanted to. Right. So I just held on to some of the better ones, and they're funny. They're funny little beans. So it's just stuff like that. It's just, I think it, it's very short and it's very thin. It's not it's an easy, quick read. I think if you're looking for a little teacher gift at the end of the year, or a little Christmas gift for I think no one would appreciate it more than an actual middle school teacher or coach. But so it may be a little niche. I don't know, but I think if you've got kids, you can appreciate a lot of it too. Right. So
yeah, no, I think so too. I think if you have a kid, especially in middle school, and you can see how they act and stuff, you could get the humor and poignancy and things out of that pretty well. So awesome. So thanks for that. And thanks so much for coming on. I like to say every episode, it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. So what I'd like to ask, and I thought I had, let me double check. Did I have a special one here for today? I thought of something. Oh, yeah. I think I already asked that question. I was going to ask you what's the most compelling phenomenon we're not talking about, but we kind of talked about it when we got to the chupacabra. So let me go back to our usual question here, which is, what is one thing anyone watching can do just to make their lives just a little bit easier, a little bit better? Like not necessarily easier, maybe better is a better word.
Put the cell phone down. I think, if not do away with social media, really limit yourself to it. It's it's become a cesspool out there. It really has. And when you write books and stuff and you're trying to promote things, you kind of have to be involved with it. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great people out there, but I think it causes so much more strife and angst than any good, that it does. I tell my kids in class, I said, I didn't have my first cell phone until I was 36 years old.
Sure.
And you know what? I didn't want it then. If I was out on the boat fishing, I didn't want anyone to call me, and they just think that that's the craziest thing they've ever heard. So I would, get off the screen, get off the monitor, get off the concrete, get outside, hike and bike and spend some time outdoors and stargaze and do stuff like that. And I think those are natural ways to lower blood pressure, relieve stress. And I just think you'll be a happier person overall if you can do that.
Right. Yeah, no, amen. I feel you completely. I like to leave my phone, and forget about it.
Except when you're watching this podcast, then you can have your phone. But other than that, get it out.
Right. Yeah. Amen. Amen. Well, it's everything in moderation, including moderation, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. Amen. So thanks, again, so much for coming on. I can link up the website. Is there anywhere else people should go to if they want to learn more?
Okay, so now when you said the website, you're talking about the author webpage, the Michael C. Mays. Is that
that's the one I have? Yeah.
Okay.
If there's another one, I can link that up there.
You might link up maybe to the actual blog. I'm not as active on it as I used to be because I've been busy with the book thing. But that's just, and it's on the website. It's texascryptidhunter.blogspot.com. And so you can go back, and it goes back a decade's worth of post and writing and stuff. And don't go back all the way to the beginning, because I was really terrible at the beginning. But the last 6 years or so, I think are pretty good. And you'll find cryptid stuff. You'll find a lot of folklore stuff. I teach history, so when you do that, you kind of become an amateur folklorist by proxy. It just happens. So there's a lot of great just stories. I just like good stories. And so I'll tell those there because, it's my blog and I can put what I want out there. And, I know it says Cryptid Hunter, but, sometimes I put other things out there just because I think it's a great story. So, but yeah, if you'll link to those, you'll probably find ways to contact me. If you've seen something, heard something, you'll find my email address on both of those where you can get a hold of me, and I'll be glad to visit with anybody that has a story to tell.
Very good. Awesome. Well, thanks again. It was a real treat. I know, every one of these episodes we start talking Sasquatch, and I let time fly.
Oh, no, I can go all day on it. I'm a little bit like you, like Matt. I don't understand how everybody isn't fascinated by it. It's just, you can say what you want about is it a real animal or not, but the phenomenon is undeniably real. And it's just, I think it's fascinating. And, the other side of that is you don't get to talk about that much in your normal daily life. People think you're a whack job or something. So, it's these situations where you can have those conversations out in the open and bounce ideas and thoughts off each other. Those are pretty valuable. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that just, anytime. So I thank you for that.
Yeah. Amen. I love, one of the things I find most disconcerting about modern times is how often we don't want to talk about things. I'm like, I'll talk about anything. I think we should just talk about it. And then,
that's what leads to,
what you want.
When you stop talking, that's what leads to hate and misunderstanding and intolerance and all that kind of stuff. I think the technology thing is such that you got a lot of keyboard warriors. They'll say anything when they're typing, but they won't say it to your face. And I see it in these kids at school. They have a real hard time looking you in the eye. They have a real hard time actually conversing with you. They don't want to do it. And it's because everything is text now. Everything is a text. And it's disturbing to see. I don't know where it's all going to end up before we're done.
Right. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see. Things have their little pendulum. So
I hope so.
Hopeful side is hopefully it starts to swing back, and we've hit the crazy point, but who knows?
Who knows? I hope so. I hope you're right about that. And but all you can do is just live your life and do the best you can, and that's all. That's all I'm trying to do.
Extra shot question for the audience: what is a phenomenon that we're not talking about? Doesn't have to be cryptids or UFOs or paranormal or whatever term you want to apply. Just what's something that we should be talking about on the show that we're not. Let me know in the comment section. You know where it is, so I'm not going to point. And there's general announcements. If you do like your Writers Drinking Whiskey on the Go or podcast on the go, generally we are available wherever podcasts are found. So your YouTubes, your Spotify's, your Amazon Music, which gets a surprising amount of downloads. You can find us there. Open bar episodes, if you're interested in those, you can go on to the Mean Green Rumble Machine website. I do have those on there early now. They will still be here, the normal cadence on YouTube, but if you want them a bit early, feel free to go on there. It's just a perk. We're trying to grow that audience as well. So as always, best way if you want to support the show is truly to buy a book. That's the whole thing we're trying to get here, is just to increase the love of reading. So I would certainly appreciate it. I know Mike is a great guy, a great writer, so he would appreciate it as well. And all of our previous guests are out there. So thanks again so much for sticking with us, and cheers, everybody.